All right, gentlemen, we're ready for another training. Let's have some applause to get this thing going. Woo! Now, what I want you guys to do is to write down any questions you have, and at the end we'll have a Q&A. Okay, thumbs up with that? All right, so let me go ahead and start the screen share and we'll get going here. Okay. Desktop. All right. Come on, move out of the way. You're supposed to get out of the way. Why is it not letting me get to my thing? Okay, I'll move it down a little bit so I can get to it. Oh, that's not what I wanted.
No.
Okay.
Me either.
All right, last time we got started on our look at speech preparation steps. What did those steps include? You remember? Huh? It involved creating content, right? Practicing the delivery, and giving the speech. Go ahead and put yourself on silent. There we go. All right, so today we'll continue our look at creating content. We're looking at the process, the system to develop and write speeches. Now remember, there are three things or three steps involved in creating content. In the first step, it's what we do before we start writing to help us to write our speech. The second step is what we do during the writing process to write the speech. And then the third step is what we do after we're done writing to continually improve the speech. Now today we're going to continue the work on the first step. What is the first step in writing a speech? What do you do before starting your writing that will help you to write your content? I hope you remember. It's knowing the big picture. We need to know the big picture. You first have to understand everything you want to accomplish with your speech before you start writing. At least that helps a lot. So how do you get to know the big picture? Now this is all just quick review. By knowing your objectives for the speech, by knowing your audience, and by knowing your purpose for giving the speech. And last time we looked at knowing your objectives. How to determine them is what we looked at. And what do we see? What should we include in our objectives? Well, I shared with you that you should include your pathways objectives, your mentor objectives, and your personal objectives. And today, that's it for last time. Today, we move on to the part two, the step two, where we go in the big space, where we go in the big picture from here, from the objectives, we go to knowing your audience. Now, this is very important. Probably the key thing in what we do before is knowing the audience. It plays a big part in helping you to write your speech so that it really impacts people. I'm going to start with three quotes that point this out. We'll start with Leslie Belkamp. She said this: the more you know about the audience, the easier it will be for you to deliver a memorable presentation. You see, when people feel that you're speaking to them directly, they don't forget that. It really impacts them. Let's move on to another quote. This is by Nick Morgan. Public speaking involves an audience. If you focus entirely on yourself in an effort to be perfect, you're forgetting the most important half of the equation. The people who have to get your presentation for it to mean anything. And so we need to be audience-centered at all times, not self-centered. And when you're starting out, it's really hard to be focused on others because you're going, oh my gosh, what's going on? Am I okay? Is everybody going to like this? Am I going to mess up? So as best we can get our focus on others, the better we'll be. And it actually gets easier over time. Let's look at one more quote. This is by Michelle Mazer. The more you know about the audience, the more you're able to meet them exactly where they are. When you meet the audience at their starting point, you'll be able to move them to where you want them to go, and you'll make them go much easier than if you try to do it without knowing anything about them. So the more you know about your speech, the more you know about your audience, the better you can tailor your speech so that it's more effective and impactful. So what are the 3 things that we want to know about our audience? What are 3 key things we should know? Okay. First one is, we should know who makes up our audience. Then, what does our audience need? And thirdly, why should your audience listen to you? These are the questions: who, what, and why. So let's look a little bit more detail of these. Let's look at the who question. Who makes up your audience? The demographics. These are basic things that can help a lot. Now, depending on your topic, some of the things that might be helpful to know is the ages of your audience, their incomes, where they live, their ethnicities, their races, their genders, their religions, their professions, their political affiliations, their professional experiences, the current jobs they have, the educational backgrounds that they come from, and different organizational memberships like Toastmasters. So these are just things that may help, and depending on what you're talking about. So that gives us just a brief overview, and that's all we're doing today. You're just getting some basic ideas. So we want to know as much as we possibly can about who our audience is. Then we move on to what? What does our audience need? And here's a couple other questions you could ask to get the same idea. Why did they come to hear you speak? What do they hope to get out of your speech? If you know the answers to these questions, it'll really help you to write your speech. So let me say those just again. So, what does your audience need? Why did they come to hear you speak? And what do they hope to get out of your speech? These are things that, if you know, again, could help you a lot. And then there's the third question. Why? Why should they listen to you? How are you going to help them? How are you going to solve their problems? How are you going to fill their needs? See, they're in it for themselves. They're not there to come and admire you and see, wow, look at that man, he's great. Oh, that woman, she's an amazing speaker. No, they're there for themselves. And they're there for you to help them. And I can tell you, one of the things I do sometimes when I'm writing my speech, when I get to this point, I actually imagine when I'm sitting at my desk, that the audience is out in front of me and they're looking at me as I'm beginning to write my speech, and they put their hands on their hips and they say, why should we listen to you, William? And so that helps me to get going, motivated to figure out the answer. Now we're going to move on to finding the answers to these questions. How do we do that? And I'm just going to cover some basic things with you tonight. So you'll find it's probably a lot shorter training than we had last night. So what do we want? What do we want to help them? I mean, how do we find the answers to help people? Well, here's a few things you can do. You can do research, right? You can ask questions of the organizers of the event you're speaking at, or your boss, or whoever out. In Toastmasters, hopefully what you would be doing is getting to know the other people in the club so that you have a good idea what they're like and what they're thinking and what their interests are, so that when you start to write speeches for the people in the club, you already have a feel for what the people are like in the club. You also, as far as doing research, you can check maybe Facebook events. There'll be an event for the thing you're going to speak at, or maybe there's a website for it, or there's other things you can connect with to get answers to help you to get to the things you want to know about who's coming to this event and who's going to listen to you. But I think probably the best way to get to know your audience and to be able to answer those questions is to do surveys. I think it's one of the best things you can do. Now, it takes time, and the biggest struggle is getting answers back. But if you get this tool and get used to using it, it could give you some insights you find very helpful when you write your speech. Now, there are lots of great tools out there that are available for free to help you to do a survey, to put it together and give a link to people, they can fill it out, then you get the answers. Now, in the PDF of these slides, I'm going to give you links to several different, or like 5 or 6 different survey possibilities you could use, different things out there, like this Question Pro here. Now, my encouragement to you is not to put this off. On your next speech, try to see how you could use a survey to help you get to know your Toastmaster audience a little bit. Okay? Now, how about this? Here's the next struggle is, okay, I want to do a survey, but how do I figure out the questions, how to do that? I have an answer for you that I use, okay? It's this. You go to Google search and you put what kind of questions you want in there. Say, I was going to do a speech on happiness. I would just put happiness survey questions and put that in Google search. And I would check to see what the surveys out there have, and maybe they'll get some ideas from those for my own survey. So I would encourage you to search and find some things. I found, when I did my surveys, I found lots of things, more than I could ever use. But it was helpful, and it gave me some good ideas on what kind of questions to ask. Remember, you want to ask questions that answer the questions we had before. Who, what, and why. Now, what if you don't have time to do surveys beforehand? Is there anything you could do other than a survey to learn something about your audience? Is there anything else out there? Yes, there is. And it's actually something that you should do even if you did a survey. But if you didn't do a survey, they still would be helpful, but they would be even more helpful if you did a survey before. And what are those things? Well, first of all, before you speak, you could walk around in the conference center or in the room where people are gathering and just meet people. Go up and just say, hello. Hello, I'm William. I'm going to be speaking. How are you? What do you do? And you could ask questions of the people you meet to get some ideas on what they're there for, what they're looking for. And maybe you could, follow up with questions to get more specific ideas from them. So that would be a good thing to do. Another thing to do is you could actually ask questions while you're giving your speech. Just have them raise their hands when you give the question. Like maybe say you're going to speak at a code, like a computer coding conference. You could say, how many in here have their bachelor's degree? Raise your hand. How many of you have your master's degree? Raise your hand. How many have PhDs? Raise your hand. And just doing that, you get a feel for where people are in the audience, and you can kind of tailor your questions and what you're going to do towards what you just found out. So these are things you can do to help you figure out what you want to say in your speech. So that's it. It's pretty slow. I told you it was going to be pretty short today. That's our look at knowing our audience. But there are a few things I would encourage you to do to help you to learn how to do this. Okay? First of all, I encourage you to download and review the PDF of these slides with the notes on them so that you can get the most out of this training as possible. Remember what I said? If you don't use it, you lose it. But within the next day or so, I would encourage you by even tomorrow morning or afternoon to go through the notes and just think about the things I said and imagine how you'd apply it and just let that stuff sink into you. Right? Then I'm going to give you a handout with links to articles about knowing your audience. Because the training was short, because it would take too long to go into all the details of the things about knowing your audience, I'm going to give you some articles to read, and I'm going to encourage you to read the first 5 of them that are on there before you start even working on this part of your speech, knowing your audience, okay? Because you want to learn and grow. Now this is kind of, I'm just giving you an idea. Here's what it looks like. You have 5, like I said, 5 links there that I want you to look at for sure. The other 3 links below that are more in-depth. So maybe you could do those over a few speeches, 2 or 3 speeches, and just keep continuing learning a little bit about knowing your audience. And then there's some videos at the bottom, just 2 of them, that knowing your audience from the Toastmasters International is very good, and it's less than 5 minutes. So you might want to take the time to look at that. So at least the first 5, I want you to read those and think about them before you start into the process of actually writing about knowing your audience for your speech. Now, after you've done that, please do a survey with the members of the club for your speech. And don't be discouraged if you don't get too many replies. Just persistently say reminders and say, hey, I really need your help. I want to know what you guys know. I want to know what you know so that I can write a better speech for you. Okay? So do that with them. And then after you've done all that, then write your answers to the 3 questions we looked at today. Who makes up your audience? What does your audience need? And why should they listen to you? And once you've written your answers, you need to remember, before you send it to me, check it with Grammarly to make sure your grammar is okay. And then send it to me for feedback. Remember, send me a Word doc or a copy of a Google link so that you can look at what I send back to you, because I'm going to mark it up, put things in red and move it up around. So make sure that you don't give me the original of your Google Doc with that. And when you do that, and we go back and forth a few times, maybe, I'll give you some suggestions. Then when we're both satisfied, then you can move on to the next step. So that's it. We've come to the end of what I wanted to share with you today. And so what I'd like to do is to finish our time, like I said at the beginning, with some Q&A. So let me go ahead and escape out of this and stop the share screen. Okay, any questions? Don't forget to turn on your mic. Yeah, any questions? Vedente, do you have anything? Go ahead.
Yeah. What is exactly the boundary between the what and why? Because I think in a certain moment it's the same thing. If can you give me a
well,
better example?
Okay. What you're trying to do with the what is, what do they need? What are they wanting to get out of this? Okay, you're trying to know what their need is, and in the why, you're explaining what you're going to do to answer that question. Does that make sense to you? The difference? The what is finding out their need, and the why is your explanation of how you're going to fulfill that need, or how you're going to use your speech is going to help meet that need.
Okay, now it makes better sense now for me.
Okay. Danuts, do you have any questions?
I do, actually. All that you built up to this point sounds for me like my day-to-day job.
So you're an expert. Maybe you should have done the training, huh?
8 hours a day already. Yeah, it's gonna need some strength for me to get.
Yeah.
How would you overcome it in my stead? Instead of, if you would be in my shoes to do this 8 hours a day and not wanting to do it another hour a day, how would you overcome it?
Well, first of all, the first thing that comes to my mind is that if you want to write something that's going to appeal to your audience, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to push through that. Right? It's something that's necessary. You can't get by without that if you want to have your speech really custom to your audience. But if you're doing it all day long, maybe the best thing would be to just get up a little earlier and do it in the morning before you go to work.
I'm going to work 45 minutes early anyway.
You are? Oh my gosh.
4 years now.
Okay. Well, I don't know what to tell you other than I know it's the same process, but you're doing something different. Okay. You're doing something for speech that you're going to do for people. And so if you can keep in your mind that you're helping to change the world in little ways, okay, you're changing your audience, that could be your motivation. You're there to help make the world a little bit better. Your words can have impact on people.
Oh, that I know.
Okay.
That I know.
So let that motivate you to want to put together the best speech possible to have the maximum benefit for your audience. And to do that, you have to know your audience, correct?
Yeah, of course.
But here's the thing, I think the more you do this over time, it will it'll be easier. It'll be easier, but it should be pretty easy for you. The challenge is being bored maybe by it all. Okay. So you're just going to have to fight through that, maybe push through that. I don't know what else to tell you, but for me,
it's the best answer.
Well, maybe like I told you how I imagine my audience right before me when I'm on my desk and I'm beginning to write my speech. Just imagine, put in your mind an image of your audience as you get ready to write it. See if that helps. Okay. Okay, Levente, any other question or questions?
Oh, it's fine for me for the moment.
Okay, good. Danuts, anything else?
I'm looking forward to the link with the PDF.
Okay. So that was pretty fast today. I would like that, huh?
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, okay. Nice. Go ahead.
What can you tell me about the audience's volume? I mean, how many people can you speak to in order to have receiving from them or from you the results expected?
Well, I don't think there is a limit to the size, but there's some things you do when the crowds are much bigger, right? It's going to be more challenging because there's going to be such a variety of people out there, a variety of viewpoints. It'll make it more challenging. You'll have to adjust the speech a bit more to include a couple different viewpoints with it. But I think the thing is, the bigger the audience, sometimes you get good energy over it. You see Tony Robbins, okay? He speaks in front of thousands of people, right? You know who I'm talking about? These motivational speakers, they speak in front of huge crowds, and it seems like the crowd is really getting into it. So sometimes the bigger the crowd, it creates an energy that you don't get in the smaller audiences. And thankfully, we have microphones now in modern times that we don't have to shout. Could you imagine back in Greece when they would be orators and they would be speaking in front of lots of people? They really had to learn to use their voice as there was no amplification of it. And you know what? You know where I learned about speaking loud? When I was doing, in my last year of university, I was studying to be a physical education teacher. And so half my day for one semester, I would go to the 5th and 6th grade and teach physical education. And we had half the gym, and there was this big curtain in between, and there was another class on the other side. And the kids were it was huge crowds, 50 kids on each side, and the noise was just unbelievable. And it took me like a month to learn to get my voice to really project. So, but thankfully, we don't have to deal with that most of the time because we have microphones. So that helps us in that regard. Did that answer, or do you want to ask me something to clarify with that?
It's fine.
Okay. All right. So with that, gentlemen, I wanted to finish just with the gallery view, so it's on the recording that we're all together. I just want to thank you guys for participating. And so look at the stuff and try to work on it. And then on Friday, we'll get together and do the one on knowing our purpose. Okay? All right. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you too. Bye.